Welcome to Dungeon Academics. My name is Thomas and I will be your instructor. I'm going to have a little talk about world building today, possibly stepping on some of Bob World Builder's toes. He's normally very good at this. I'll give it a shot myself. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about roleplay games that are set in our world or a parallel world to it with much of the same history. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about some of humanity's most despicable acts of genocide. So I'm going to put a content warning in now. If this kind of topic is not for you, then please skip this one. Now, I am currently writing a story for a game that is set in a world much like ours. And I am going to be referencing some real world atrocities as part of the world building and the larger story for this game. And this has led to a bit of an issue that I have seen happen in stories and something that I'm going to have to tread very carefully around. Now, it's hard to say this, but it's absolutely true. Humanity does not have the best track record of treating our fellow citizens in a fair way. For a large part of human history, genocide and ethnic cleansing was the objective of war. You didn't just conquer territory, you conquered territory and you annihilated whoever lived there so that your people could move in. And as much as we like to think that we are a more civilized species now, even in the early 20th century, the late 20th century, the early 21st century, there are numerous examples around the world of conflicts where genocide and ethnic cleansing are either the stated outcome, the desired outcome for at least one side, or have been part of the overall total war that's being waged. And this is happening on multiple continents, in multiple conflicts, again and again. It just seems part of the dark side of human nature at this point. And it's heartbreaking to see it happen, because I'd hoped that we'd grown past this as a species, but obviously we haven't. This darkness appears in fantasy and science fiction as well. Look at the first Star Wars film, A New Hope, Episode 4, 1977. The planet of Alderaan is destroyed to demonstrate a weapon. Countless billions of people snuffed out in a moment so the Empire can say, this is what you've got, you better do what you're told. A clear example of genocide for political purposes. In fantasy stories, in Lord of the Rings, there is the scouring of the Shire. Genocide as a means of revenge. In Game of Thrones, every time there is a siege, it is mentioned very clearly that people know what happens to the besieged city if the city breaks. Humans are very bad at this. So what part do they play in our stories? This is all started by a book I read many years ago by an author that I really like. And I really like the series of books. I'm not going to mention which one because he does something a little bit questionable in it. He stated in the story that one particular act of genocide was done as an effort to perform a ritual. A blood sacrifice was needed. And so a group of people were slaughtered to provide a sacrifice so they could perform this ritual. Now, this is a real world genocide that actually happened in our history. And in the story, it was performed so a ritual could happen. And I find that quite distasteful. To justify perhaps the wrong word, but to explain a genocide. It was done so we could do this. And the thing they wanted to do, the ritual they were going to perform, was awful and terrible and disgusting. But in some way, I felt it cheapened the death of everyone that died. It explained away this atrocity, not as an act of pure human barbarism and hatred, but as a conscientious choice to achieve a different goal, the completion of a ritual. And that sat wrong with me. Now, bring this into my own writing. A group in the story that I'm going to be telling is trying to bring back an elder creature from another dimension, and that requires a sacrifice. And I was thinking, could I tie this into actual things that happened in human history? And that reminded me of the story that I'd read earlier. And I thought, no, I think that cheapens the death of all the millions of people that died because of human activity in this area, because of deliberate war crimes in this area. I don't want to have their loss attributed to anything other than our human weakness and the hatred that lives in our hearts. So I still wanted to tie this in. So I thought maybe instead of these acts occurring to unleash this creature, maybe the awakening of this creature was unconsciously started because of these acts. Maybe these creatures thrive on human pain and human suffering, and the generations of slaughter and genocide that have occurred in the particular region that we're dealing with are what awoke it, and through that its cult started. So rather than the cult directing these genocides to try and wake the creature up, the creature was awoken by these genocides. And I like that idea a lot more, and it actually has a parallel with Godzilla. The original Godzilla stories have Godzilla being awoken by the nuclear testing, and this creature is brought to consciousness from its slumber because of the nuclear testing, and the hubris of humanity unleashes this terrible creature on the world. And I think that is okay in a story, to have an unintended consequence caused by the terrible acts of humanity. But co-opting war crimes and genocide into a story and saying, oh no, it wasn't done because we're a bad species and because we kill people on a huge basis. It was actually done to summon this creature, and that's what the slaughter was needed for. I don't like that. So, in my story, the atomic bombings in Japan, the massacre and atrocities in Nanjing in China, the killing fields of Cambodia. I cannot write a story in which those awful acts were orchestrated in order to awaken a terrible creature. But what I could do is I could have the stirrings of some elder spirit because all these atrocities are happening in a short order. So having this as a consequence rather than a cause, I think that's still morally justifiable. And if you are writing a story in which war crimes, atrocities, genocide is happening, and it's our world. I think we need to be very careful about this, not to cheapen the terrible things that we have done as a species, and try to justify them in some other way, because they can't really be justified. We are terrible. In fantasy and science fiction, you can go a lot further. As someone who's read a lot of Warhammer 40,000 and Horus Heresy books, the number of planets that have been annihilated in order to summon creatures from the warp, that's quite high. You can get away with a lot more in science fiction and fantasy. But in our world, we have to be careful. So, yeah, I had to change what I was writing just to be a bit more respectful of our past. And I think it's worth spending a bit of time just to make sure that you're not doing anything too terrible. I think that's a worthy investment, as a writer, as someone who's telling stories. Don't cheapen the losses that we've inflicted upon ourselves. You can use them as a catalyst, but don't change their cause, because in a good story, sometimes the most terrible and frightening thing is what a human is prepared to do to another human. Well, there you go. That was a rather dark topic, but I thought it was an important one to make. And I promise you, the rest of the videos I'm going to be recording in the near future are a lot less grim. So try not to take too much horror into your life, and instead play some games. Enjoy your next game, whatever it might be.